You and I met through the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop, and it was for those of you who don't know, the Composers Workshop is a regular meeting of emerging or developing jazz composers. The focus of the workshop's activity is big band composition. So the purpose is to foster musical growth of these new composers and also create more music for the jazz orchestra. And at the time, I guess it must have been 2008, J.C. Sanford, another trombone player that I had gone to school with in Boston, was booking the band. So the band would get together once a month and we would read through the new compositions of each class of the BMI Jazz Composers Workshop. And you did it for many years. You did it from 91 to 2015. Did you take over for Bob Brookmeyer?
Yeah, he left. That was the impetus for me joining. The way it worked was, Bob and Manny Albam were the first two musical directors, and Bob was more or less the head, and Manny was the assistant. And when Bob left, Manny became the head musical director, and they brought me in as his assistant musical director. Actually, the first year Roger Kellaway was there also. But I think his wife's mother got sick. They were out in LA, and so they had to move back out to California. So then it was me and Manny for some time. And then when Manny passed away in 2001, I took over as the chief musical director till 2015.
And you work with Mike Holliber, right?
Yeah, Mike Holliber. Micah Benny was there too. Micah Benny, and then Mike, when Mike finally got the job with the Cologne radio band, then Mike Holliber came in.
And that's when I was there. It was you and Mike Holliber. I still do it now, but we do miss your face.
Yeah, well, I felt it was, I'd been there 24 years, and I felt like I had said everything I could say, and it was time to get some new blood in the thing. So,
Do you have some fond memories of people that have come through the workshop?
Oh yeah, I think my best memory is all the people that came through that really, in one way or another, really got turned on to composing or got turned into a different direction through it. And I always used to say that I never saw the workshop as me or Mike Holliber in front of the group telling you got to do this. To me, there was a horizontal aspect to the workshop. It was all the members learning from each other, and yeah, I was there, or Holliber was there, but there was as much learning going on among the different members as there was, any kind of transmission of information from me to them. And that to me was my favorite part, was seeing how somebody would come in, and people would come in with different levels of experience and technical knowledge, and some of them would tend to become the stronger voices, and then you'd see other people saying, hey, I'm going to check out what this person is doing, and someone like Joseph Phillips Jr., who was writing this music that was combination of it reminded me of Steve Reich meets Marvin Gaye meets the big band, and all of a sudden, 3 months or 4 months after he started writing his stuff, people would start writing little repetitive things, like, I'm going to check out what Joe's doing, or to see the way Rufus Reed, when he took early retirement from William Patterson, where he was teaching full time. And he just really blossomed in the workshop. I knew he had written big band arrangements here and there for a long time, but he really got into it. In fact, one night he and his wife came over to our place for dinner, and he brought a score he wanted to look at. So he and I went up to my music room, and Doris Reed took my wife aside and said, how long is this going to last? And Marie, my wife Marie, said, well, what do you mean? She said, he disappears into the studio at night and I never see him again. How long is that going to go on? And my wife said, forget it. It'll keep going on forever. And so to see somebody like the way Rufus, responded to the dynamic of the workshop and blossomed was really, to me, that was the big payoff, is to see when certain people would really get into something and really develop.
It's interesting because as a performer, we're playing with people all the time, so we're learning from people all the time on gigs. But when you're composing, you don't have that sort of camaraderie until you get a group like this.
Yeah.
Even just playing the music once a month, I can see how people evolved.
Yeah, that's one of the things I always said about the workshop, is that it gets us all out of our individual studios or music rooms and it would get us in the same room once a week talking about what we were doing, and that to me was to provide a meeting place for like-minded composers that was a really important part of it. Just to, going back to that image of the lonely composer at the table, this at least meant that, once a week I had to shave and put down my pencil and go look and act civilized with a bunch of other people. It was good.
Well, you did a good impression of a civilized person.
I did what I could with what I have, But another big payoff with the workshop for me was getting to know Manny Albam the way I did, and seeing how he presented information to the students, and and then to hang out with him. We after every class session, he and I would go across the street and have a drink, and he'd talk about all of his many experiences, and he became like an uncle to me, and I learned a lot from him, just from the hearing the stories and hearing about the scene back in the 50s and 60s when he was coming up.
I've also read that you had a special relationship with Bob Brookmeyer. Didn't you have your rehearsal dinner at his apartment?
Yeah, I met Bob. I forget when I met him the first time. I knew who he was, but he had come back from the West Coast. He was off the scene, recovering with alcoholism, and he came back to New York. And Stan Getz hired him to play with his quartet. He made it a quintet. That was a nice thing for Stan to do, and Stan was capable of doing nice things. He was also capable of just being a whole nother kind of guy too. But and so Bob was playing, and the big breakthrough was when Thad left Mel, and Mel invited Bob to come in as musical director. So that's when I really got to know him, and we had we never. I mean, it was a loose. It was more like a mentor-mentee relationship, not necessarily student-teacher. We'd hang out, and when he moved to Brooklyn, to Park Slope, and a year or two later, I moved into an apartment on the same street, about a block and a half down the street from him. And so we had a rehearsal dinner at his house, and we'd hang out and talk about stuff and music and life and all that. And then he did a tour of Europe. I think it was 1980 with Mel's band, and he was the featured soloist. And so we'd sit together on the bus every day and talk about scores and things that the band was playing. So I learned an awful lot from Bob, and he was a big help to me. I mean, frankly, so much of my career the last 30 years has been involved with European big bands, and none of that would have happened without him. I owe him a lot.